Creating Accessible Excel Files, Chapter 5, Appropriate Uses of Color. This training video is produced by the Accessibility and Policy Unit of the California Department of Social Services. The basis for this criteria are both WCAG 1.4.3 contrast minimum, ensuring the contrast between the background color and the font color is high enough for people with low vision and color blindness, as well as WCAG 1.4.1, not using color alone. This means ensuring that color alone is not being used to convey information, which can be critical for people who use screen readers and people with certain kinds of color blindness. Perhaps, more than any other file type, we have to be particularly vigilant in paying attention to color and visual elements within Excel. Always ask yourself two questions. 1. Is color being used to convey information? And 2. Is the color contrast high enough, such as the font color against the background color? Regarding contrast ratios, remember the minimum contrast ratio we need to meet to comply with level AA of the WCAG is 4.5 to 1. This represents the contrast between the color of the text and the color upon which the text sits. And the minimum ratio allowed for large text, 18-point font or larger, or 14-point font bolded or larger, goes down to 3.0 to 1. In Chapter 7 of the Word Accessibility Training video series, the steps for testing color contrast with the Color Contrast Analyzer tool are discussed in further detail. Note, while the Accessibility Checker has started to notify you if it identifies color contrast that may be questionable, it is not 100% accurate. You will have to check your color contrast manually. In Chapter 3 of this series, we touched upon how when a table is created in Excel, the colors applied automatically to the table may not meet color contrast requirements. It is good practice to keep the Color Contrast Analyzer tool open and check color contrasts as you go. Besides the colors of your table rows, another common color contrast issue found within Excel is the default colors applied to negative numbers. Colors that do not meet the WCAG accessibility standards of text to background ratios can only be found by conducting a manual check. Additionally, while there is often something more than color alone being used to note negative numbers, such as a negative symbol or parentheses, this alone does not help those who have low vision. The negative sign or the parentheses are great for the screen reader users. Keep in mind that persons with low vision may struggle to understand this information due to the lack of contrast between the font color and the background. You must always ensure the color contrast is high enough and that color is not being used alone to convey meaning. Color text is used a lot in Excel to represent meaning, and the default reds and greens do not meet accessibility standards. Let us now show you an easy way to fix this issue in your Excel files. Let's say you have a table that uses a lot of red text to represent negative values. Step 1. Highlight all of the cells to which you want to edit the color of the negative numbers so they appear as a certain color, etc. Step 2. While under the Home tab, select Conditional Formatting. Step 3. Select Highlight Cell Rules from the drop-down, and then Step 4. Select Less Than. Step 5. Determine from what number, such as 0, you wish to format cells that are less than to appear with a certain font color and style, and select Custom Format. Step 6. Use the Format Cells dialog box to edit the number style, font, border, and fill. Select the Number tab to edit, for example, whether the negative number has parentheses or the negative symbol next to the number. This is also an area where we see the predetermined color red that does not pass the color contrast requirements. To edit the font style and color, select the Font tab. If the color or shade you need is not there, simply select More Colors and you can select a different color or darker shade. Finally, under the Border tab, the color and thickness of the border can be determined, and under the Fill tab, the background color can be addressed. We strongly discourage the use of patterns for background fill, as it can present color contrast issues with the font and can be difficult for those who live with certain cognitive or learning disabilities to read. Remember, the accessibility checker will not capture all color contrast issues and will not be able to determine when color is being used alone to convey information, such as the different colors that pertain to different counties within the table. As we keep learning, it is critical to also run a manual check. The Accessibility and Policy Unit has developed quick checks for this purpose. Running a manual check will be discussed in more detail in Chapter 7. By keeping color contrast issues and ensuring color alone is not being used for meaning, we will provide better access to our documents for people with a variety of disabilities. For more information about this topic, or any of the topics in our series, contact the Accessibility and Policy Unit at accessibilitypolicyunit@dss.ca.gov.